Trauma can form and shape lives. Unfortunately, it seems to be a fact of life that trauma can affect someone's personality and development. I believe this subject matter can be quite difficult to tackle in film as a whole. However, I believe Room 2015 is one of the best examples I can think of that tackles this subject matter. I just love the way that it represents a wide variety of different traumatic responses within the course of its narrative. The film is adapted from the book of the same name, Room, written by Emma Donoghue. She also created the film's screenplay. I believe that this film desperately needs more analytical and discussion-based content on it. So, in creating this video, I hope it can cause a few more people to engage with and seek out the film. Within the actual video, I want to analyse how it presents multiple different perspectives on the traumatic events throughout its narrative. Room 2015 follows the perspective of the 5-year-old protagonist Jack. We begin the film on his 5th birthday and we slowly begin to understand the situation he and his mother are in. Later on in the film's narrative, it is revealed that his mother, Joy, was kidnapped by a man they refer to as Old Nick. Old Nick kept her hostage from when she was 17 in a shed in his backyard. Unfortunately, this means that Joy was subjected to sexual abuse for many years before Jack was born. Jack was born in Room, and that's the only place he has ever known in his whole life. Throughout the film, we learn more about Jack and his mother as we see them both process the extreme trauma they have faced. In fact, the author of the book was triggered to write this book from a real-life case. This is the infamous Fritzl case, which involved the horrific imprisonment of a girl who eventually had children in captivity. The events of the film have a clear similarity, but the real-life case is much more brutal, unfortunately.
And in this particular case, how could he possibly get away with it for so long? It's just unthinkable. A father who kept his daughter locked away in a secret chamber for 24 years. The poor girl was just 18 when the horror began, and over the years she had 7 children. 1 died, 3 were kept prisoner down in the cellar, and unbelievably, the others were adopted by the father and lived openly upstairs as his grandchildren. No wonder the family's story stunned the world.
I believe this key context is necessary to understand how this film represents and reflects situations that have actually occurred. However, like the film, the kidnapper and his horrible actions are not the main focus of this video. Room only briefly shows the criminal and instead focuses on the victims and their experiences. About halfway through the film, Old Nick disappears and is only mentioned briefly post-escape. Instead, we see how Joy and Jack deal with the long-lasting mental suffering from this kidnapping. The film deals with themes of trauma, innocence, family and society. Jack and his mother have been forcibly shut off from everyday life. In fact, Jack struggles to understand a world he has never known or experienced, while Joy struggles with the trauma she has faced and raising a son in these dire circumstances. After they both escape Room later in the film, they must come to terms with what has happened in order to move forward in life. As the protagonist of the film, we experience the narrative progression from Jack's point of view. He acts as a narrative focalizer, as the audience only experience events that he as a character does. For example, there is a sequence where Jack secretly watches his mother participating in a news interview. We see a variety of camera shots of Jack's head peeping out of the stair frames as he is comprehending and reacting to what his mother says in this interview. The audience almost becomes like a child that secretly listens to the parents' conversations on the stairs, like the character is doing. I know at some point in our childhood lives we have all done this. This narrative focalization and framing allows us as audience members to comprehend the complex emotions and confusion the young child is feeling. Furthermore, this narrative focalization allows us to understand how Jack deals with trauma. There are key narration segments that allow us to understand what he is thinking in this visual medium. The narration segments act as a flow of consciousness as we hear this child's processes and thoughts. I just love how this film tackles and explores this childhood perspective. This film tackles some of its serious matters and elements of trauma in an effective way. A key scene that demonstrates this is when Jack is watching Joy and Old Nick through the wardrobe. For a bit of context, his mother deliberately attempts to keep Jack away from Old Nick and makes him sleep in the wardrobe when Old Nick visits at night. Although Jack cannot see the sexual assault taking place or even really comprehend what is going on, I believe he does understand that something is wrong here. I believe the film is quite tasteful as it doesn't get unnecessarily graphic at any point. Most events are heavily implied, but they are never actually shown on the screen. In fact, the sound also subtly reflects the film's depiction of trauma. The sound department created an isolated but inquisitive musical effect within Room's day sequences. Despite being a dead space that the characters are trapped in, the sound and music reflects Jack's playfulness and exploration. However, when Old Nick visits, there is a sense of danger and that something is clearly wrong. The sound department utilised a slight use of equalisation and hollow sound to emphasise Old Nick's unpredictable nature. This film allows us as adults to observe and experience how a child processes traumatic experiences. It provides this childhood experience despite the fact that it is not suitable for a young audience to view. I just love how the film balances this childhood innocence and the dark narrative events. In fact, it is one of the best examples of an adult-orientated representation of coming-of-age narratives. Essentially, Jack's character experiences traumatic events both inside and outside of Room. Within Room, he and his mother are isolated in a claustrophobic space. This isolation will have a clear impact upon his development. Furthermore, Joy attempts to hide the traumatic events occurring in Room to him, but gradually she must face the fact that she cannot protect Jack from this trauma and Old Nick forever. This results in her needing to use Jack to escape, which is traumatic within itself, really. After the escape, Jack experiences the impact of this event, as he sees the conflict and mental struggles of the adults around him. Also, he is overwhelmed with the new world he is forcibly exposed to, which is traumatic again in itself. Towards the end of the film, we see Jack gradually integrate into this new way of life. Despite all the trauma he has faced, he actually wants to move forward with his mother. Obviously, like in real life, this trauma will probably never completely disappear, but hopefully Jack's character is able to thrive in the new life he has obtained. I also wanted to include a quick side note for this section to praise the minor and effective moments of traumatic responses from Jack's character. The film includes these traumatic responses but never over-represents them or even draw too much attention to them. For example, the night after the escape, Jack wets the bed in the hospital. This is obviously due to the immense amount of stress caused by the escape and the new surroundings he is being exposed to. Including these extremely natural and understandable responses to the events is key to how the film represents trauma. Another one of these key examples of trauma-related details is Jack's first experience with stairs. I love how he reacts and deals with these ordinary house features as he has never experienced them. It is not a long drawn-out explanation or anything, you just get to see him get some help from his mother after he has clung to the rails. Throughout the course of the film, we gradually learn more about Joy and her life before she was taken. Joy is a complex and traumatised character, as she is forced to raise her son in such extreme conditions. We see her growing frustration, anger and later depression due to what has happened to her. Despite us constantly being exposed to Jack's perspective, the film allows us to experience the effect this severe trauma has had upon Joy as a character. We see that the birth of Jack has given his mother a way of coping with this dire situation that has been forced upon her. Despite this, there are days that she mentally disappears and physically cannot get out of bed. Jack refers to these as gone days. While we see Jack essentially left alone as he desperately looks for a form of entertainment, we see Joy heartbreakingly disassociating from the reality she's faced with. These gone days can be described as periods of disassociation. Feelings of disassociation are often reported by survivors of sexual assault. A person experiencing these feelings can be detached from their surroundings, depersonalised, and have lessened reactivity. These periods of disassociation for Joy must act as a way of coping or getting away from the emotional exhaustion this situation causes. Post-escape, we see Joy experience a variety of different traumatic responses. One is anger as she looks at the photos of her old school friends. She comments that her friends
just lived their life and nothing happened.
It is clear that she resents the fact that this event happened to her and she could not just live a regular life. Obviously her anger is completely justified, and we as audience members can see her going through the traumatic after effects of this incident. Another traumatic response we see from her is guilt. After engaging with a press interview about her traumatic experience, Joy is clearly hit with a wave of guilt. The bloody awful reporter suggests that
when he was born, did it ever occur to you to ask your captor to take Jack away?
Away?
Well, to take him to a hospital, say, leave him there where he could be found.
Why would I do that?
So Jack could be free. Now, this is the ultimate sacrifice, and I understand that. But did you think about him having a normal childhood?
But he had me.
Of course he did. But was that the best thing for him?
I mean, the audacity of asking this is beyond me, but in the context of the film it leads Joy to reflect on whether or not she did the right thing for Jack, and this becomes too much for her to cope with. This inherently traumatic comment leads her to try and take her own life. This reporter represents someone who attempts to profit off Joy's trauma, and her unsympathetic and careless comments caused her extreme mental anguish. We don't get to see all of Joy's character development and how she gets help for her trauma. After she is saved from her suicide attempt, it is inferred that she is taken to a mental health facility to help her deal with her trauma. Thus, we end up seeing more of Jack's development than hers. Although by the end of the film I think it is clear that they both have grown. The final scene is key to portraying this character development and progress that both Jack and Joy have gone through. We see them together return to visit Room as a way of reflecting and leaving behind what has happened. This can also be considered exposure therapy. As Jack personally says goodbye to his past objects within Room, we see him leaving this part of his life behind. Joy is a lot quieter in this sequence, but she does take a final look before she and Jack walk away.
Bye-bye, Skylight. I'll say bye-bye to Room.
Personally, I think that Joy is still affected by the trauma associated with this area, but the final look may have helped her in some regard. Joy may still be traumatised, but she resolves to move forward with Jack and continue her life with him. A perspective we begin to see later in the narrative is Joy's family, particularly her father and mother. As Joy and Jack escape Room and re-enter society, we see the trauma her parents have faced after her disappearance. It is revealed in Jack's narration that Joy's parents had divorced at some point after her disappearance.
But Ma says they don't live together in the hammock house anymore. Grandma lives there with her friend Leo now, and Grandpa lives far away.
Sorry.
Joy's mother formed a relationship with a former family friend. I like how the film doesn't spell out exactly what happened, but it can be inferred. My own personal theory is that Joy's mother received a lot more support from a former family friend than she did from her own husband. Both the mother and the father present two different and distinct reactions to the situation that they are dealt with. Joy's father will not even look at or interact with Jack after he is reunited with his daughter. This causes a major conflict between him and Joy at the dinner scene. Then after this conflict he leaves and returns home. We do not get to see him again in the narrative or get any resolution to his relationship with Joy. In not dealing with or working through his trauma, he instead has chosen to self-destruct and run. So this suggests how the father deals with trauma is inherently unhealthy and has severely damaged or even ruined his relationships. It is not really addressed within the film clearly, but I believe how the father chooses to ignore Jack could be an indicator on how he dealt with Joy's disappearance. There aren't any clear answers in this regard, but I like how this aspect is left up to interpretation. Alternatively, Joy's mother embraces Jack. Both her and her new partner attempt to accommodate Jack, even if he is nervous about them to begin with. One of my favourite moments of this careful support is Leo, the mother's new partner, playfully talking to himself about having a tasty breakfast when he knows Jack is at the top of the stairs. The character knows Jack is nervous from his lack of exposure to people, so this creative technique allows Jack to engage with this relatively new person on his own terms.
Okay, so what am I gonna do now? I wonder if there's anybody around that would play with me or talk to me. Guess not. I'm pretty hungry. Oh, I know. Got something in the kitchen, I think. Oh, yes. I've got something very tasty in the kitchen, I think. Let me see what's here. Hello.
It is clear that Joy has a supportive network after her escape. Joy's mother even states at one point in the film,
"We all help each other stay strong. No one is strong alone. You and your mom, you help each other through, don't you?
Yep.
You and me, you and Leo and me, we all have the same strong."
However, that doesn't mean it is smooth sailing for everyone after the escape. We see that Joy is struggling with the trauma caused by this event as she snaps at her mother. This argument is key as we see both sides of this traumatic frustration. Joy states,
"You don't need me. You've been doing just fine without me."
and her mother highlights,
How can you say that? Huh? Do you think that you were the only one whose life was destroyed?
It is clear that both characters are severely traumatised and lashing out at each other as a way to vent. This circumstance has emotionally and physically impacted everyone within the family. I love how this film shows the family perspective on trauma and how it can affect everyone. After Joy is taken to the mental health facility, we see Jack bonding with his grandmother and forming connections with new people. Leo brings his dog to meet Jack. I believe this event in the film is extremely significant as we see Jack embrace new experiences away from his mother and room. The meeting with this dog is also more significant as Jack even wanted a dog within room but couldn't have one. So this event is just the beginning of his new life. Eventually Jack even asks his grandmother to get his hair cut. I believe that within room Joy would not have been provided with scissors as she could utilise it as a weapon. So this meant that Jack's hair has never been cut in his lifetime and has grown to an extraordinary length. Jack's main goal by cutting his hair is to send it to his mother, as he states,
I want to send it to Ma.
How come?
She needs my strong more than me, so I want to send it to her. Or you could take it to her.
Again, he attempts to help his mother with this trauma in his own childish way. His grandmother helps him do this by cutting his hair for him. I believe this event allows him and his grandmother to become even closer. Furthermore, this act of cutting his hair represents a new form of identity for Jack. It is like he is cutting off his past and starting anew. To conclude, Room 2015 is a hauntingly beautiful and effective example of how trauma can impact a child and their family. By using Jack as a narrative focalizer, the audience experiences how a child processes traumatic events. We also get to experience how Joy and her parents have coped with the trauma they have experienced. Although we experience this from Jack's point of view, it allows for a deep look into how these extreme circumstances can impact a family. I just love how this film balances and interweaves the many different traumatic processes each family member goes through. I haven't actually read the book yet, but the film really makes me want to track it down and read it. Please let me know what you took away from the film and if you have seen it. Or if you have read the book, please let me know what you thought of it. I am very interested in reading it. Thank you for watching and engaging with this video, and please subscribe for more.